Season 3 has just launched, and we've leveled up the SkillCappedUI with some brand new updates, which are available right now with the click of a button. And as always, we've got you covered in the early season with in-game BIS lists, which are just one of many amazing features available only to SkillCapped members. For everyone else, today we're going to show you how to set up every add-on you will need in Season 3, including changing some hidden settings which can make a huge impact on your gameplay. To start, every good interface needs a solid foundation, and for WoW, the core part of any UI is unit frames. But there's one problem: Blizzard's default frames lack customization. So to fix this, we're going to create our foundation with BetterBlizzFrames. The name really speaks for itself. Once installed, you might not notice any differences, but let's type /BBF to change some important settings, starting with hiding arena frames. This will hide Blizzard's default arena frames when you're using an add-on like Gladius, S-Arena, and so on, but more on that later. BetterBlizzFrames even has some PvP-specific advantages, like a combat indicator, which is extremely useful as a rogue. And under the cast bar tab, you can check this box to make it easier to kick evokers when they're using empowered casts. Then there are some optional aesthetic tweaks we can make, including class colors on frames and the ability to hide names on any frame you like, which some players like to do for a cleaner look. And if you want to skip all of these steps, our add-on will configure every option automatically, including every quality of life feature. And if you're a SkillCapped member, you can skip our next step, which will save you hours of research. Once you have your unit frame set up, there's another problem we need to solve: nameplates. In this day and age, with hundreds of tiny debuffs for every spec, there's a lot of potential for clutter. Trust us, you definitely don't need to see all this information, and doing so might make you play worse. We're going to fix this with BetterBlizzPlates, which is an absolute lifesaver in PvP. Now, we know that there are tons of alternatives here, including Plater, which we actually use in our PvE profile, but for PvP, we prefer the simplicity of BetterBlizzPlates. Anyway, once you're in game, type /BBP to bring up the options menu. On the right-hand side, make sure to check these boxes to create icons for our healer, our partners, important pets, and then finally this totem indicator. With this single change alone, you will be able to track positioning much easier inside of Arena, and as a DPS, you will have less trouble finding your healer and vice versa. We cannot stress just how big of a difference this makes. And by the way, totem indicators are huge in PvP and include way more than just shaman totems. And again, your awareness will improve with the ability to snipe down Healing Tide and Psyfiend like a Navy SEAL. Then we need to filter out some debuffs on our enemy nameplates, and this next step is crucial for maximizing damage. In the Nameplate Auras tab, we're going to whitelist our most important debuffs. For instance, if I play Assassination Rogue, I'm going to add Garrett and Rupture, while avoiding adding things like my poisons, since these are applied passively. And then check the first two boxes to only track my own debuffs, while making them bigger and easier to see. If we want to track something but keep it smaller, we will simply add it and check the first box only, like we do here with Shiv. Now we can see a side-by-side comparison of what nameplates look like with and without filters, and as you can tell, there is an enormous difference. Of course, knowing what exactly to track and manually adding these filters one by one is going to require a ton of research. But if you want to save time, SkillCapped members automatically get a comprehensive filter for every class and spec. Now it's time to add our arena frames, and there are a ton of options. We personally like BigMex's version of Gladius since it is kept up to date with new spells and DRs. Even though we could use the default setup of Gladius, there are a few optimizations we should make. But let's start by typing /Gladius and /GladiusTest3 to pull up the options. First, we recommend going to the General tab and adjusting the frame scale to 1.2. And to clean things up, let's click Background Color and drag the right slider all the way down. We recommend adjusting the height of the health bar to 25, and then going to the Power Bar tab and setting the height to 15. And make sure in the Trinket Bar section that the size is also set to 40, and then copying these positioning settings. We then recommend going to the Cast Bar section and increasing the height to 40, which will make everything the same size. The only thing left to fix are the Racial and Dispel icons. We will go to the Racial tab and attach it to Trinket, and then set the X and Y offsets to 0. Finally, we will go to the Dispel tab and attach it to the Trinket, setting the anchors to top right and bottom right, and once again, setting the offsets to 0. This is more or less what we use in our official SkillCapped profile, which can be installed automatically with our add-on. Oh, and if you plan on playing BG Blitz, just make sure to get BattlegroundEnemies, which is like Gladius for BG content. Now it's time to make our frames even better with one of the most lightweight add-ons ever, OmniAuras. This is basically big debuffs and buff overlay packaged into one convenient add-on and will benefit every single player. The big debuffs part of OmniAuras is simple. It takes the most important buffs and debuffs and makes them 10 times more visible on every frame. This alone is a massive buff to your awareness. Then for all of you healers out there, OmniAuras will make it really easy to tell when your teammate has any defensive active. Super useful in solo shuffle. You can also use OmniAuras to make it easier to see important information on nameplates. In the nameplate tab, we recommend changing the preset to health bar right and then changing the X offset to 1. This will make important debuffs appear to the right of enemy nameplates, synergizing perfectly with our BetterBlizzPlates profile. Other than this, you really don't have to change many settings, but if you play healer, we highly recommend going to the raid frame tab, then going to blizzard buffs, and setting the max number of auras to at least 6. This will make it much easier to track HOTS if you're playing a Resto Druid, for example. Now, for any advanced player, we highly recommend OmniCD. This add-on will allow you to see your teammates' cooldowns, which is essential for solo shuffle, and still really good even if you're playing with voice chat. Knowing what cooldowns your partners have available means you can make more calculated decisions, like when to sync up CC and offensives to score a kill, or on the flip side, knowing when it's time to pull back the moment you notice everyone is out of defensive CDs. Unfortunately, OmniCD is one of those add-ons that can cause information overload if you're tracking too much, and you also don't want to track too little. Your goal is to strike a balance. At the very least, we recommend going through each spec one by one and making sure you're tracking defensives, which is crucial, especially as a healer. Then we also highly recommend tracking major CC cooldowns, things like Freezing Trap and Blind, which are used to set up kills. If you want to save some time, we've automatically configured OmniCD with every relevant cooldown most players would ever need to track in Arena. This is a premium exclusive feature, so just be sure you've imported your code from SkillCapped.com when using our setup tool. And as one final step, we highly recommend making sure OmniCD is anchored to the left side of raid frames. We will talk about this later, but it's important to keep the middle of your screen fairly open, and shoving everything to the left keeps your screen less cluttered. And if there's one final add-on nobody in this day and age should be playing without, it's OmniBar. Tracking enemy cooldowns has been a fundamental part of PvP for nearly 2 decades, if you can believe it. Whether it's juking interrupts, setting up kills around defensives, or knowing when it's time to avoid a CC, 90% of the outplays you should be making in PvP start with OmniBar. Unfortunately, the default settings of OmniBar aren't that great, as every cooldown is clumped together in a giant mess. Good luck making those outplays when you're wasting time scanning through all these icons. To fix this, we need to create different bars to track different types of cooldowns. We will devote one for interrupts and another for crowd control, and we suggest putting both of these somewhere near your cast bar. Then we will make a third bar for major defensives, and finally for extra credit, we will make a fourth bar for any spell disruptions, like Grounding Totem and Spell Reflection, but you could definitely throw these into interrupts too. If you're a SkillCapped member, you can even use our pre-configured add-on profile, which has done all the work for you, including the next step, which is to filter out all of the junk you don't actually need. If you want to keep your UI as clean as possible, you don't need to be tracking smaller cooldowns. It might seem tedious to split up your bars like this and make all these filters, but it will be worth it in the long run by making information much easier to digest. Of course, no UI is complete without the god tier add-on WeakAuras. We've included 9 major WeakAuras in our UI package, which are individually configured for every spec and updated for 11.2. One relatively new WeakAura we recently added was for dots, and will display icons of important maintenance dots like Flame Shock directly next to your arena frames. We've also updated our class buff section, where we display important procs and damage modifiers to the right of your character. And if you're missing a buff or pet, and if you don't have poisons or imbuements on your weapons, then you will get a simple reminder in the center of your screen. This is also the section which will display any important buff or debuff currently affecting your character. The goal here is to prevent you from needing to check the top right of your screen. Speaking of increasing awareness, we've also included the iconic Healer in CC WeakAura, which is an absolute must for solo shuffle, displaying a very clear alert when your healer is stuck in crowd control. Of course, we also use WeakAuras to track enemy cooldowns, which has been updated for Season 3, and displays large icons at the top of your screen. There's also another one we've included that alerts you when the enemy healer is drinking. Obviously, there's a lot here, so feel free to disable anything you don't plan on using, and be sure to delete any duplicate WeakAuras if you've installed the same one twice. And if you want zero compromises with maximum awareness in Arena, be sure to get Gladiator Losa. This add-on is basically the audio version of WeakAuras and OmniBar, giving you spell alerts through sounds, which on average means faster information than your eyes alone. Now, just like OmniBar, we need to be a bit selective on what sounds are worth tracking, because if you don't spend time filtering out things like polymorph, your ears are going to be spammed non-stop in Arena. In the configuration window, the most important tabs are Buff Applied and Cast Success. In the Buff Applied section, we recommend going through each spec one by one and selecting the most important offensive cooldowns, things like Pillar of Frost and Metamorphosis. If it appears on our enemy CD's weak aura, it should be selected here. Then go to the Spell Casting tab and uncheck everything. This will prevent you from getting spammed non-stop in Arena. You could check some boxes here, but be very selective. Finally, go to the Cast Success tab and repeat what we did in Step 1, selecting only the most high-impact offensive abilities for every spec. And if you want to save time, our members-only profile has already filtered out all of the spells you don't need. Anyway, now that we have all the most important add-ons, it's time to line up everything on our screen, which we can conveniently do with Edit Mode. First, we recommend moving your action bars to the edge of your screen on the bottom and right-hand side. Most players will need at least 5 action bars total, and doing 3 on the bottom and 2 on the right tends to produce the best results. Then we recommend moving your player and target frames slightly towards the middle of your screen, and right below them, lining up your party frames with your focus, keeping both of those in line with your arena frames off to the right. Just make sure nothing is overlapping with any weak aura and that your OmniBar isn't covering your cast bar. We've configured our add-on to automatically change some hidden settings in WoW, including the ability to automatically set your spell queue window, which you can only do with a script or with advanced interface options. By typing /AIO, you can open the configuration window where you can set your custom lag tolerance, and we recommend making it your latency plus 100. Here, you can also make sure you have the maximum camera distance, which is super useful for playing BGs. You can even use advanced interface options to modify any conditional variable, which is just a fancy word for in-game settings. Some of these actually have an impact on gameplay, like the ability to hide pointless minions from specs like Demonology, Warlock, and Unholy Decay. And if you want to skip all of these steps and download the #1 UI for PvP with the click of a button, be sure to use the discount link below. We've even updated our classic add-on for Mists of Pandaria, with MOP-specific profiles and a complete package only available to SkillCap members. Not only does a single subscription get you a fully configured interface, but an insane head start on the competition no matter what expansion you play. We are the #1 resource for mastering PvP, with thousands of guides available right now for retail and classic. 3 games, 1 subscription, and over 400 rating guaranteed. Visit skillcap.com to learn more. For now, we want to thank you all for watching. See you soon.